All right, mini makers, let's get started on your October kit. And that is, well, you saw in the picture what it was going to be, but here are your pieces. You have these cute little polar bears. One just sits in a stand, and the other one has a tea light that will sit on it. Okay. Tea light just sits back there, and it will shine through the heart cutout of his belly. Okay, so I'm gonna pull all my pieces and my paint out of the box, and we're gonna get started painting. Now you have a paintbrush and some wood glue, and then you have a variety of paint colors, and you have a Q-tip that's to put on your glue, and you have a bunch of wedges. You're gonna want a pair of scissors and a cup of water and your baby wipes and probably a paper towel. All right, so make sure you don't lose any pieces. Just set everything aside very carefully. The first thing that we're going to do is we're gonna glue, I know we're starting out gluing. We're gonna glue these bases together. Let me move this camera a little bit. Okay, that's a little better. We're going to start out by gluing these bases together. So I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of my wood glue around. Make sure you don't have a lot of wood glue on there. Use your Q-tip if you need to. And I'm going to glue these two bases together. And now I'm lining my fingers up along the edges here so that these are completely straight. All right? Want them completely straight or else your bear won't sit in those notches. And then I'm just going to set that off to the side. Make sure you don't slide them because you want them to sit. You want them to be completely even with each other. I'm going to do the same thing with this little oval stand. We're going to slide these together. Make sure all the edges are completely straight. And then we're going to set that aside and let those sit up and dry. Okay, so we're done with the glue for a minute. Now we're going to paint. And we're going to pull our pieces off and paint our bear. So let's go ahead and paint our bear. We're going to paint our bears white. And I'm going to use just a white sponge to paint our bears white. Now, their eyes are engraved, so when we go over top of that eye spot there, we want to make sure our paint is really, really light. So save that until your sponge is almost running out of paint. And now remember, when you do things with tabs, you can't get a lot of paint on those tabs, so I'm just going to avoid that tab altogether. I'm not going to put any paint on it. All right, so my sponge is almost out of paint here. I'm going to gently swipe over top of the eyes. Just swipe over top. See, when I swipe just really, really gently, I don't fill those up with paint. So you got to make sure there's hardly any paint on your sponge, and you're just swiping really gently in those spots. I'm going to come down and fill more of my bear in with some white paint, and then I'm going to come to the top. I'm just going to swipe gently over top of where his eyes go. And I'm probably gonna have to do that a couple of times. So let's let that piece dry, and we're gonna paint his muzzle here. Now I'm gonna paint this white, but we're gonna do a little trick with it at the end. So we're gonna go ahead and paint that white. We're gonna paint this bear white. Make sure your paint's light. You don't want heavy coats, just light coats of paint. You probably have to put 2 or 3 on. Same thing when we get to this guy's eyes. We're gonna go really, really lightly over them so we don't fill them with paint. Just like that. We're gonna get his ears and his little hair. Swipe over top of the eyes just very gently. Not a lot of paint on my brush at all, on my sponge. His little feet pads, the little feet pads are white. I don't think I'm gonna paint my snowflakes white. We'll wait and see. I think I'm gonna have them blue. Alright, and then this little muzzle here, we're going to paint that white as well. Okay, so now everything's got one coat of white. We're going to go back and we're going to put a second coat of white on. Remember not to get paint on your tab. Too much paint and it won't slide in, so it's best not to put any paint at all. Real light over top of the eyes. You won't get paint down in there. All right, second coat on every piece. Make sure your paint's light. You don't want heavy paint. Heavy paint's messy. You guys should be pros by now. Real light over the eyes. Light touch. All right. And then all the other pieces, we're going to give them their second coats. Okay, so there's all of our white pieces painted. Now let's paint our bird. I'm going to have a red bird. So I'm going to take my white sponge and I'm going to paint his beak white. And then I'm going to take a little sponge. Cut your sponges in half. You don't need a big sponge. And I'm going to paint my bird red. And we're just pouncing, not a lot of paint. You'll put a second coat on. And don't forget his wing. You need to paint his wing. Now we've got a little heart here. We're going to paint our heart red. Now this big heart was just the cutout to here, so it's really just garbage, but you can paint it, give it to mama or daddy or something. Okay. Oops, I missed a paw that needed to be painted white. So this guy is actually a paw, but he's cut out because he has little things that sit around him. So this guy's got to be painted white. We missed him. Go back and paint him white. Now he'll need another coat, so we'll have to wait for a second to give him another coat. Okay, while we wait for all of that to dry, we're going to paint some other things. We've got these two little pieces here. These are the noses. So we're going to cut a sponge into a strip here. And we're going to paint that black. Okay, and our scarves. I'm going to paint the scarves blue, but I'm probably going to lighten it a little bit. So I'm going to dip my sponge in my blue and in my white. So I've got a little bit of both on there. All right, there's my scarf. He's gonna need another coat, so we'll wait. And then I'm gonna take the other scarf. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna paint the whole thing with some white and a mix of blue in there. All right, there's my scarves. Let's see, this guy's probably ready for his second coat, so we're gonna go ahead and grab a little bit more blue and white. And now this time when I paint, I'm not gonna worry about blending my colors in so much. I'm just gonna kind of let them do their own thing. So if there's a little bit of white in there, a little bit of the dark blue in there, that's okay. That's what I'm gonna let happen. So you can see I got some different shades in there. We're gonna leave that be. All right, I'm gonna put another coat on this little paw that I missed the first time. And give a third coat to any of your white pieces that might need it. All right, I put a second coat on my my birds, and we're going to put a second coat on our noses. All right. And then we're going to paint our trees here. So we're going to open our green. And we're going to take a sponge and dip it in our green. And then we're going to paint our trees. Now we don't have to paint this whole thing because our bear is going to sit on top of this. All right, and then we're going to come on this side and we're going to do the same thing. Remember not to paint your tab. Your green's going to need 2 or 3 coats, probably 3. So let that dry. I'm going to set that off to the side while it dries. All right, let's see what else we got here. I'm gonna paint the stripes on my scarf. I'm gonna use the brush that's in my kit, and I'm gonna use the blue with no white in it. Okay, so the color is just gonna be pretty subtle. That just means that you're not gonna really be able to see a big difference. It's just gonna be a light difference in color. So I'm going to paint every other section. So there's the first one. I'm going to skip one and come over here. There's my second stripe. All right, there's my stripes. Now I gotta do stripes on the scarf hang part, the parts that are hanging. So we're gonna come in just every other section. We're gonna paint. Just a nice quick stripe. You don't have to worry too much about being in the lines. It's pretty easy just to paint that straight mark there. And now I'm going to reverse it. So I'm painting stripes that don't line up on either side. All right, there's our scarf. And we're just gonna set that to the side. And then on this scarf, I'm gonna just come in and do some swipes with my brush, just with the tip of my brush in that darker blue paint. Just gives it a little bit of depth. All right, you see that? What a big difference that makes, right? It looks like all the folds of the scarf. And you see how easy that was to paint. Okay, I'm gonna give my trees another coat. Now is the time to give everything a second coat that needs it, or a third coat, okay? So let's get our trees. Maybe our trees will only need yeah, I think that's gonna be enough there, that second coat. We're gonna let them dry real good because we're gonna put some white snow on them. All right, there's our second coat on our trees. We're gonna let those dry. All right, we're gonna take our red paint sponge because we should be done with our red paint now. All of our reds got 2 coats on it. And we are gonna get most of the paint out of it. I'm just wiping it off on a paper towel or my table cover or a baby wipe. And then I'm gonna dip it. You can see it, there's not much paint left in there, right? We're gonna dip it in our white paint and we're gonna come and we're going to kind of work that white paint in. We want it just a little pink. See, that's too much pink. I don't want it that much pink. I'm gonna grab some more white. You can wipe it on a paper towel. Okay, now I got most of the paint out of it. And so I'm gonna come to the snouts, okay? And I'm just going to go around the outside of the snouts with a little bit of this pinkish color. Just like that. Do the same thing with the other one. Just around the outside edges. And it's very, very light. And then I'm also going to take my brush. I'm going to clean my brush out with my cup of water. And I'm going to use the same really pale pinkish paint. I'm just going to grab it right off of my table here because I've got enough of it. And my brush is kind of wet for me rinsing it off, so the paint's a little thin, and that's perfect. I'm going to come up in his ears, in that inside circle there. It's the inner part of his ear. I'm just going to paint that in a little bit. Just like that. I'm going to do that on all 4 of them. We got 2 bears, 2 ears on each bear. That means I got 4. So just like that. I'm going to do the same thing on this guy here. All right, just like that. And then we're going to clean that brush off again. I'm going to take my black sponge that has almost no paint left in it. Same thing, don't want lots of paint. I'm just going to come around the outside edges of his little paws because I feel like polar bear feet are probably a little dirty and probably have a little bit of color to them. So I just want to get those outside edges to define them a little bit. All optional. You guys don't have to do any of this, right? So just depends on how good of a painter and an understanding of it that you guys have gotten over the last year of Mini Maker, and what your skill level is and how much you want to do. You don't have to do anything. That's the beauty of these. You can just paint them plain and it would be just fine. And then this part of his paw is just going to be this bottom rounded section here. Just a little bit. And that's it for that. Now we're going to take our brush that's clean. Everything is painted except for our snowflakes and our bases. And our snowflakes aren't painted yet because I wasn't sure what color I want to paint them. I think I'm going to paint them blue, and I'm still under that. I still think that's what I'm going to paint them. I'm going to put my trees in front of me, and I'm going to grab my white paint, and I'm just going to get a little bit of my paint out, and I'm going to put it on my table. I know you can't see that, but I just got a tiny little bit of paint. Here, let me move the camera back. Sorry, it's going to be, there you go. So you can see I just got a tiny little bit of paint there. I'm just going to get my brush wet and get that water mixed into that paint so it's a little watery. I just did one brush of water. And then I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to move all my painted stuff out of the way. I don't want it getting on any of my nicely painted stuff. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to tap it over my trees because I want it to look like it's snowing. All right. I do the same thing on this side. Okay, and that's it. So now we're gonna let our trees dry the rest of the way. And while our trees dry, we're gonna paint our snowflakes. And I'm gonna use my blue sponge for that. And I'm gonna dip it in some of the white paint. White paint as well because I don't want it very blue, but I just don't want it white either. So we're gonna go for a light blue. And then we're gonna paint our snowflakes. Almost like our scarf color. And one last snowflake. Okay. All right, we're gonna wait for everything to dry. Well, we got our bases here. Let's paint our bases. Let's see. Let's just paint them black. So go ahead and grab your black sponge again. And let's paint our bases. All right. Okay. Get yourself all cleaned up, get your table space cleaned up, and let everything dry, and then we will glue it all together. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just dry fit everything on so we know where it goes. So on our big bear, we've got the scarf with no tails. He's got the little bit bigger snout and a little bit bigger nose, and he's got the two bigger paws. He also gets one big snowflake and one small snowflake. And then he's got the little cardinal with the little wing on it. And then our smaller bear has the two small paws, or it's a whole paw, and then that one little piece paw. And then he's got the scarf with the tails on it. He's got the little heart. big snowflake, a little snowflake. He's got the smaller snout and the smaller nose. All right, so we're gonna start gluing. So I'm gonna glue his little snout on. Now remember, you either use your Q-tip, your little swab there, or just make sure your glue is very light. You don't want a lot of glue because it will squeeze out all over the place and make a mess, and we don't want that. So just a little bit of glue in the center, and if you get too much glue, take your Q-tip and get it off, okay? So just a little bit. And then we're gonna put the snout over top of the score lines there, exactly where it goes. Straighten it up so it's straight up and down. A little bit of glue on the bottom of his nose. Stick his nose on where it goes. And then let's put his scarf on. Okay, just that little bit of glue. Line the scarf up with the edges of the bear. They're cut out just like the scarf, so they'll line up exactly. So line those up and then put some on his paw. And then that sits down right in the middle of the scarf there, just like that. Okay? And then we're gonna put this paw on. And the heart. And then the snowflake. We're just gonna put a little bit of glue on the snowflake. And we're gonna put the snowflake right on his paw like that. And this one we're gonna put right up by his ear, just like that. All right, we're gonna let this guy dry for a second before we put him in his holder. And then we're gonna glue this one while we're waiting. So same thing, a little bit of glue on his snout. Put that snout right over top of the score lines. A little bit of glue on his nose. All right, we're gonna glue on his scarf. Line it up with the notches on the side, okay? That's what those are for. It's lined right up. Glue his paws on. Again, line them up to the outside edges. They're the same shape. We're gonna take the wing of the bird and glue the wing on. You're gonna have very little glue. I got a little too much there. And then we're gonna glue him to the top. So he's like sitting on the paw, okay? Just like that. And then, I don't remember where, oh, I know. We're gonna put this on this other snowflake on the Christmas tree. So, let's bring our tree over. And we're gonna put our tree down. And we're gonna put some glue on this. And flip your bear over and you can put the glue on the back here as well. Just make sure everything's dry before you go flipping it. And then we're gonna line up the bear to the cutout of the tree that matches the bear here, and make sure the heart is all centered as well. There we go. And then we have to let everything dry. Make sure it's all dry, dry, dry. And then we're going to take this snow and we'll put this on the tree over here. Okay, Everything's got to dry for a minute before we can pop it in at the bases. So clean up your mess and we'll come back in just a minute. Okay, all of our pieces are dry, so we are ready to set them in their bases. Now this guy here gets put on the base that has the big round circle at the back. And the circle at the back is just to set the tea light on. So we're just going to pop that on just like that. And then your tea light, which is hard to see on the camera, of course, your tea light will just sit right back here on that space. Okay, just like that. And that's how that looks from the front there. And then this little guy will just slide right into this space, just like that. And that's you. There you go. There's your complete set. So cute. I hope you guys like this, and we will see you guys in a couple of months for the next mini maker.